guys are looking for truth. There was a study that just came out that Gen Z males are now leading in church attendance for the first time in history, more than females. Why do you wake up in the morning?
Yeah.
If you don't think about that actively, then all of a sudden you're just kind of doing your thing, you're paying your bills or whatever, you're just kind of getting through life. And it's like, no, there's a deeper reason for why you were given breath for that day. And as a Christian, I'm alive to shine for Christ. People wanted a human ruler over them. And the Lord's like, all right, here's the good things he's going to do. And here's all the curses you're going to inherit. And they're like, we don't care. We want it anyways.
I'd prefer if you wouldn't mind just letting my audience know who you are. I know you have some exciting new things going on right now.
Yeah.
And then that will just kind of lead us into, the conversation.
Yeah, totally. Shane Winnings, I'm 34, live in Florida. So I'm an Army officer, former Army officer. I served with the Special Forces unit and deployed to Afghanistan in 2014. After that, I was a cop for 5 years south of Seattle. So I worked night shift in like a really violent area. So it was a lot of fun. Almost died in 2020. Someone tried to kill me.
Wow.
So that was fun.
Fun's a word.
It's just wild. You find yourself in these situations. You're like, dude, I never thought I would be here. And, speaking of that, I never thought I'd become a traveling preacher, but that's exactly what God asked me to do after my police career.
Okay.
And so I was a traveling preacher to America for like 4 years. And then a year ago, this month, I took over a national men's ministry called Promise Keepers.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that's, if anyone watching, just ask your dad, like, have you heard of Promise Keepers? Pretty much everybody has at least heard of it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it was a huge honor to take that over.
For those that don't know, give us the quick overview of Promise Keepers, and then I want to backtrack on your story because I have a couple questions on those.
Yeah, so Promise Keepers founded in 1990, and it was like, man, there's not a lot for men in the Christian space. There's women's conferences all over the place, but there wasn't stuff for men. And even still, there's not a ton of stuff just for men.
Right.
And so this football coach, Bill McCartney, he coached the Colorado Buffaloes. So like Deion Sanders today, it was that team. He won a national championship, but he started a men's ministry. It was like 40 guys, and it kept doubling until one year they did 22 NFL stadiums in a year. All of them sold out. Like insane. And then they gathered 1.4 million in DC at the mall. It's the biggest gathering in U.S. history on that property. That was in 97. So that's our legacy. Hasn't been that for a long time. Organizations lose their steam. They go through bad leadership. So I'm honored to be taking it over. And, we're bringing a lot of different things to men around the nation to connect and to ultimately connect with God.
Why do you think that a lot of times there's just not a lot of programs for men? Men seem, Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot in his book, that men are forgotten about, and men are a lot of times just suppress your feelings.
Right.
Don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Man up, toughen up, do your thing. Why do you think there is a lack of programs like, Promise Keepers for men?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us to do what we need to do as men, when I was a cop, I couldn't like cry if I went in and I was dealing with a child rape case or something like that. I mean, you just naturally kind of block that off so that you can do your job, and then you process it later. But I think as men, like, we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. At least we should be if we're in the right spot. If you're managing a family and your work and everything, you should feel crushed.
Yeah.
That is what I think manhood is about. But it's understanding, man, God is with you, and his burden is light. His yoke is easy. And so I say that to say, to take a man who's used to carrying the weight of everything and not talking about a lot, and try to get him to gather with other guys and do exactly that. Like, it's not easy unless you're offering steak or pizza or you got a football player speaking.
Right.
So guys are trying. There's a lot of organizations out there, but I think these last 4 years have really helped because guys are looking for truth. There was a study that just came out that Gen Z males are now leading in church attendance for the first time in history, more than females. So the itch is there. And I think Promise Keepers is the answer to scratch that itch.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're excited about trying to take what was once like the thing for men.
It was crazy.
And then now you're trying to not even reclaim that, but build it into something. Are you trying to take it in a little bit new direction, or is there going to be opportunities to take what is good and helpful and always make it practical for like 2024?
Yeah, totally. I don't think I don't know if we'll see stadiums filled again. That would be cool,
Yeah.
but I'm not trying to go book a stadium. Like, Coach started small, and then it got big naturally. That's how any organization works. Charlie didn't just wake up and here's
Having MFAS.
20,000 people. I think it started in a garage or something like that. And so it's like, I am starting where we're at, which is we're standing up men's groups across the nation. I want guys to be connecting on a regular basis. And so we went from 18 to almost 100 in just this last year. We've got digital stuff. We're starting a college tour next year where we're raising up young men on campuses to lead. So really, my heart is like, let's engage men with the organization,
Sure.
but pointing them to God,
Right.
and it'll build on its
Well,
own.
because that's the ultimate goal.
Exactly.
Right. Because you could be part of an organization, but if you don't have a relationship with Jesus. So, funny enough, I traveled for 2 years as a traveling evangelist.
No, right on.
Yeah. So, when you said you traveled, so there was a team called the Coffee Ministry Team. We played Irish music.
Cool.
So, we had like Irish band, and that kind of broke down. We did Irish concerts, and people would show up and would give the gospel. And I did that for 2 years right after college.
That's epic, dude.
And now I live in Detroit, and obviously we started the podcast about a year ago. But yeah, so when you mentioned you were traveling in the future, and that's why when your assistant reached out, I'm like, yeah, like okay, this is definitely who I want to talk to you about what you're doing because it's important.
Well, we need that. And
Yeah.
I traveled the nation in 2021. I did a 44 city tour. I just leveraged my social media following, no paid advertising, and was seeing who would join me in parks and fields around the nation. In some places, we had 5 people show up. On average, it was probably 50. Still 50 per city. I was pretty pumped. But then we had a few cities where we had 2 or 3 or 400 people come.
Wow.
And so I would just preach the gospel and then pray for miracles. And we saw radical stuff. But that showed me, man, this is during a pandemic. These people are coming out. They're looking for truth and they're getting filled with hope. And I'm like, this is the answer. This is what we need.
Do you think that 2020 was because it was bad? I mean, the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, from like I'm not trying to glorify that, but I think one thing it did was obviously it made people awake to the corruption and everything that was happening in our government.
Yeah.
People that were like, oh no, our government's awesome. They're the
I was
best.
one of those guys.
Same,
Like,
right, same. But I also think it showed how empty we are, and especially the amount of depression and when you're locked in your own homes that
Man.
had. Do you think that 2020 has potentially been a catalyst for people searching for truth where beforehand they were maybe just coasting
yes.
in life, and then 2020 was like, holy crap, life is fine now.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, man. It was I mean, even for me as a follower of Jesus, like my eyes were open to stuff, and that caused me to look into everything. And I think that's what it did, and I think it was a gift from the Lord that happened. Obviously, I think there were horrible things that happened because of 2020, and people lost their lives and all these other things, but God uses the things that the enemy means for bad, and he flips it on its head for good. So the way I look at it is like, dude, 2020 was going to happen, but God allowed this great thing to come out of it, which was a generation of people who were like, that'll never happen again,
Right.
as long as I have anything to say about it. And so that's why we've got people digging into stuff. And one of the things they're digging into is, well, what is the truth? Because I'm getting lied to by the media. I'm getting lied to by the government, who I was taught to trust my whole life, who I thought the FBI, CIA, Jason Bourne, they're all on my side.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
And so
What?
they're digging into the truth. They're finding the word. And that's what resonated, I think, even with voters, was you've got one party that's doing vasectomies and abortions and one party that says, hey, you're at the right rally. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was a clear choice, I think, for a lot of people.
When you live your life, when there's no just like set morality, when morality is fluid,
Yeah.
like that's what the left tried to do. It's like, no, it's your truth. You can lay out however you want to. But even where I feel like being a conservative is awesome, but being a conservative isn't the end goal,
No.
right? It's a cool thing, and I think that it leads people down the path of truth, being like, oh wait, why don't we want to kill babies? Right, because that's the question. It's like, why don't we? Well, we believe that there's a power higher than us that has given us rules and said this is wrong.
Yeah,
It's actively ether.
yeah.
And so that's the
Not a mystery.
right. And so that's the beautiful thing about an event like AmFest, and a bit people around. It's like, even if a conservative is just a tipping point, then the questions start. Well, why do we read this? And then that's why missions like you and like I lead youth group at our church, and so like
So needed, man.
yeah, that's
It's getting
so
people
important.
digging
Right.
into what's the motive. Why am I say this all the time, like, why do you wake up in the morning?
Yeah.
If you don't think about that actively, then all of a sudden you're just kind of doing your thing, you're paying your bills or whatever, you're just kind of getting through life. And it's like, no, there's a deeper reason for why you were given breath for that day. And as a Christian, I'm alive to shine for Christ.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people that vote correctly, but their hearts are a mess.
Yeah.
There's people on the right that are just as bad as people on the left. They just vote the right way. And so that's what I see.
Yeah.
That's not a popular thing to say, but I'm not here to make friends. Like, I'm here because the truth is what sets people free. And so you could be voting for the right party and you could be dying on the inside because your values are trash or you don't understand what life is all about. And so, when you talked about suicide and depression, dude, that came for everybody on the left and the right and in the middle.
Yeah.
And so that's why we need the hope of Christ so people understand like there's something better to live for
Right.
than just, well, I hope my president gets elected and I hope I get that promotion. I hope it's a rat race. Like it'll never end.
Yes.
You're an evangelist. I'm speaking your
Yeah,
language.
no, it's the exact same thing. I mean, that's kind of why it's so important to have Christians in politics. I think for a while, Christians would be privately having conversations, but they'd be a little bit like, well, I don't want to be edgy. I don't want to offend people. I don't want to do this. But when,
Things Jesus never said, by the way.
yeah, right, exactly. Jesus is very bold, by the way.
Yeah. I came to divide your family.
Yeah.
That's pretty bold.
flipping some tables. That's an interesting perspective or for total goals to get people to Christ, actually being bold with why we believe in morals is just, it just helps get to that new, and it's why Christians, I think, should be involved in politics.
Yeah. Politics is the highest form of love. It is how you love a nation. Politics is how you care for a people on a macro level. I mean, you have rules in your family and in your house, probably.
Yeah.
You've got rules at your job. But then when we talk about rules and regulations for the nation, we're like,
We don't want to get into that.
Political.
And yeah.
it's like, well, then you haven't read the Old Testament. It's a very highly political book.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And you know what? The reality, too, is that we have politics and there are consequences to even having politics because we turned away from God. The people cried out for Saul. This is in 1 Samuel. The people wanted a human ruler over them. And the Lord's like, all right, here's the good things he's going to do. And here's all the curses you're going to inherit. And they're like, we don't care. We want it anyways. Now we have rulers. Now we have presidents. And you know what? God uses them. And I believe we have a great nation and we've got a great president-elect, Donald Trump. But the reality is there are consequences to having human leaders. They
They're
make
still sinners.
human mistakes. Yep. And man, that should just show us all the more like my allegiance is not to a nation or to a party or to a person. It's to Jesus.
Yeah.
And then it's to a nation. And if that ever gets out of order, well, my allegiance is always to God. That's who I fall back on. That's who I've built my life on. And to what you're saying, there's people who build their lives on everything else. It doesn't have the
Then they feel empty.
They don't have the steam to run the race.
Yeah.
It'll be about the next candidate and the next candidate instead of, dude, I don't care who's president, we shouldn't kill children.
Right.
I don't care who's president, we should, it's like
Yes.
the truth that never changes. That's the word of God.
Absolutely. I could talk to you for an hour.
Yeah,
by the way.
same, man.
This is fun. Yeah, I just feel like we should just vibe sometime and just chat because this would be a way longer conversation. But due to time crunch, I want to be respectful of your time, and we have more interviews coming up. How can people support you? How can people support what you're doing? And obviously, Promise Keepers and everything else. Would you mind feel free, shout out. So Souls is your opportunity, whatever you want to do.
Totally, thanks. Yeah, promisekeepers.org. That's our website. You find everything basically on the homepage. And then we're on all socials, and then I'm at Shane.Winnings. And then another thing I'll say is, starting in January on my YouTube, Shane Winnings, I'm going to read the Bible live every day in 2025. We're going to go through the whole Bible. So the goal is like massive biblical exposure and literacy because there's 3.2 billion people that have never heard the gospel. And a lot of those people are on social media.
Yeah.
And we can't assume that just because everyone has a phone that they've seen the Bible app or whatever. So, man, join me.
Yes.
15 minutes a day or so, and we're going to read the whole Bible. If you've always wanted to read the Bible cover to cover but never have, this is your year. I'll read it for you.
What platforms are you planning to do that on?
I'm going to do it on YouTube Live.
Okay.
Then we'll have the replay, obviously. But then we'll have a podcast so you could listen to audio on all the podcast platforms.
Well, we'll make sure we get each other's information. That way we can promote and try to help you guys grow together. Thanks for coming on the show, bro.
Yeah, man.
I love meeting another brother in Christ here. As much as I love conservatives and I love what we stand for, having a deeper connection to that is just kind of awesome.
Amen.
And so appreciate you guys. Follow Shane. We'll include all the social and stuff. Thank you, brother, for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it. Cool.